Hello, my friend. Welcome to The Flip Side. We're in episode 3 of 2021. That's right. The Flip Side has come back with a fury. We got a new format. We're asking 3 quick questions, 7 minutes each for these questions. We're going to go deep, intense, and fast, and no better person to help me do that than the Dena Davidson of the Bible study on Wednesday night fame. Man, you've been killing it with Andrew and Mark Clark on our Bible study on Wednesday night. I hope you guys tune in for that too. And here you are with one of my favorite topics, one of my favorite leaders, because you're an apologetics person like I am. And we're going to talk about doubt.
Yes, I love it.
We're specifically going to talk about John the Baptist's doubt.
Yeah, because he was a good guy. You can't say he was like a terrible person who had doubt.
I mean, there's an argument to be made, and I'll tell you, I'll give you a little hint who made it, Jesus, that he was the best guy.
Yeah, I think it says something about that in this passage.
All right, let's read it. Matthew 11, 1 through 11. If you're driving, just listen. If you're not, open your Bibles. Matthew 11, 1 through 11. After Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, he went on from there to teach and preach in the town of Galilee. So this is way north of Jerusalem. This is out in the sticks. This is hometown territory, not Jerusalem, not New York, not Los Angeles. This is Fresno. Okay. When John, who was in prison, way down in Jerusalem, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, he sent his disciples to ask him, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" In other words, you guys hike all the way up there to Galilee and tell Jesus, "I'm having major doubts." Jesus replied, "Go back and report to John what you heard and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me." As John's disciples were leaving, Jesus began to speak to the crowd about John. "What did you go out to the wilderness to see? A reed swayed by the wind? If not, what did you go out to see? A man dressed in fine clothes? No. Those who wear fine clothes are in the king's palaces. Then what did you go out to see? A prophet. Yes, I tell you. And what more than a prophet? This is the one of whom it is written, I will send my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way before you. Truly, I tell you, those who are born of woman, there has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist. Yet whoever is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. What an odd passage. John the Baptist, who came out early, the Son of God who takes away the sins of the world, goes, "Hey, I'm doubting whether or not you're the Messiah." In response to that, Jesus tells his disciples, tell them what you've seen about the healings and the poor. Then he starts preaching to the crowd and he says, you didn't see this guy because he was a doubter. He was a reed blown. That's an imagery for doubt. You didn't come out and see this guy because he was successful and powerful and politically connected. Mm-hmm. You came out and saw him because he had moral authority. He was righteous. And man, in response to him questioning me, in response to him being a doubter, I want to tell you, there's no better guy that's ever been born.
Hey, Curt, you ready to jump in?
I'm ready to jump in. Taylor, the timekeeper, he always knows I'm going too far. It's such a fascinating passage. What in the world's going on here? Or, as we like to ask on the flip side, question number 1, why study this? Why master this odd little passage? Why master this material?
Well, I think it's one of the most encouraging passages if you've been walking with Christ for a long time and then you find yourself in a season of doubt. Because I think there can be this idea that the longer you've known Jesus, the less questions you should have about him. But John the Baptist, he knew him from the womb, literally. Like, he recognized who Jesus was from the womb. And yet, here Jesus is just stepping into his ministry, actually now beginning to do what John knew he would always do. And yet, John is having a crisis of faith. He's sitting in prison thinking to himself, did I get it completely wrong? Did I baptize the wrong guy? What is happening? And so I think it's just, for me, as someone who's been following Christ for a while, it's encouraging to me to know it's okay for me to still have questions, even though I've known Jesus for a while.
In fact, it's not just okay. The denial of your questions is a lot of work. What I love about this is John isn't stewing in his jail cell. He's writing letters to Jesus, going, I'm in a little bit of crisis here. I mean, sometimes we read the passages and we make them too complicated. We just don't see them as the people they are. First of all, this is a great passage against fabulization. If I'm writing a subversive myth that I want everyone to believe, I do not include my hero having a major jailhouse crisis moment like this. And it's part of this is really simple to me. We master this because the point is, the further we get from Jesus, the easier it is to doubt. He's not seeing the miracles. He's not hearing the sermons. He's been against whatever he's done, isolated from the dynamic, powerful, life-giving ministry of Jesus. And Jesus gets this. He's doing it because he's been arrested and the evilness of the opposition to him. The sad part is we do it to ourselves. So people come into my office all the time, say, I'm having a crisis of faith. Tell me about your church attendance. Well, it's non-existent because I had this thing in the shift, and then my child and my mom or da-da-da-da. Tell me about your devotional time. Non-existent. Tell me about your prayer time. Non-existent. And yet I'm mad because I can't feel or see or understand any dynamic of real faith in my life from Christ. And proximity is a problem. Jesus said, follow me, not zoom into me. Jesus said, come and see in Mark. I love that phrase. Come and see. Where are you staying? Come and see. What are you going to do? Come and see. Come and experience this with me. So part of it is John the Baptist is at a disadvantaged place. He can't change his circumstance, so Jesus sends the report to him. We often can change our circumstance. And the further we get from Jesus, the more inevitable doubt is. The other thing that's going on here, Dena, is doubt is either cancer or catalyst.
Oh, that's good.
So John the Baptist is having a doubt. He asks a question that catalytically reveals more of Christ to him. He gets imagine the meeting when they come back from Galilee. They hike all the way back down. They get in Jerusalem. Whatever they have to do to find where he's under house arrest, they're about to chop his head off, so it's pretty intense. They get to him and they say, listen, there was this leper. He put his hand right on the leprous sore. Teacher, he put his hand right on the leper, just like you told us would happen. You should hear him speak. He doesn't speak like anyone speaks. What happened to John? In the shadow of death is over him, and all of a sudden he's hearing about the poor being liberated, the leper being healed, the lame walking. It was catalytic for courage. It was catalytic. Or it could become a cancer. I'm not writing this letter to Jesus. I'm not admitting I'm having this crisis. I'm going to, do you ever have a debate with someone, Dena, but the whole debate happens in your mind?
100%.
Yes. Yeah, that's called being married.
Exactly.
That's called having kids.
Yeah.
And you're on your way home and you're having the debate. Why didn't my kids clean the house? Then you walk in, Daddy, we cleaned everything. Oh, I'm such a sinner. He could have stood in that cell and had the debate in his mind. Yep. And that would have been cancer. So it's really not a question. It's just like you said, we're going to have the doubt. What do you do with it? Do you ask the question of God and have it turn catalytic, or do you stew on it and have it turn cancer?
That's so good. And honestly, I think that, John the Baptist is this guy who he just used his doubt as an opportunity to ask the right question. And I think obviously he could have asked the question, why did you allow me to get here? Like, why did you allow this to happen to me?
Which is the question that we want to ask. Yep.
And it's a good question. I don't think Jesus minds when we ask that question. But he chose the right question. He said, who are you? Are you really who I thought you were? And I think when we as Christians go through trials and tribulations, which question we choose to really go after with God is going to define how that conversation goes and whether it's more that cancerous conversation or whether it's that catalytic conversation. So he chose the right question.
What if from here to, we're recording this during Lent, so whenever you're listening to this, you pick your own time period, but what if from here to Easter, that's the question we ask at the beginning of every day? God, Who are you? Have I assumed you're something that you aren't? Can you show me who you are? God, the dangerous prayer of don't worry about the disruption to my life. Show me who you really are. It's so good, Dena. That's, Jesus said, who do they say I am?
Yeah.
What a powerfully good question to ask. God, prove yourself to me is the question we want to ask. God, what happened to me? God, why did this happen?
Right.
I say they're all fair questions. Who are you? Such a better question. All right, here we come. Cameron with the coffee. Cameron, look at the camera for a second. People got to get, they only get, the way the set is set up this time,
He's like, "Where's the
you
camera?"
only get the,
Right over there.
Cameron's shoulder blades. There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
The kneeling version. What are we drinking here?
So we're drinking a Kenya Githongo. Githongo with the passion fruit and lemon verbena.
Wow.
The African coffee. I like the African. All right.
And it's ready for question 2.
I was looking right at you. Taylor, the timekeeper. Question 2. Which is question 2 again?
What is the point?
What is the point? Okay, especially theologically. If you're going to draw it, I'll take the first shot of this, and then Dena, you give us the right answer. Okay, I think one of the points here theologically, there's such a rich passage in this little story, is the incarnational nature of Jesus Christ. So apologetics, the defense of the faith, wants to go philosophical. Let me state my theses. Let me prove my theses. I was just rereading some Norman Geisler. He does so powerful of going, this is obvious.
Right.
From this obvious, this is now true. From that truth, theism. That's Geisler in a nutshell. I think what is superior to that, and even more satisfying than that, as satisfying as the logical argument is Jesus just shows up. I mean, what makes the virgin birth powerful, what makes Christianity so different, this is, again, back to Mark Clark's The Scandal of Jesus, the problem of Jesus, is the interruption of God being here in the flesh.
Right.
It's the C.S. Lewis thing. He didn't leave us the option of thinking I was a nice little teacher. He just showed up and started doing. So here's what Jesus doesn't do in this passage, Dena. He doesn't go, tell John the Baptist to reread the scroll of Daniel, the second half where it talks about the timing, and do the math and see that I am right on time. So being that I'm in the 77-year window of apocalyptic time math glory, I'm the Messiah. He doesn't say that. He points to the prophecies that are incarnational. He's like, what he's really saying here is, doesn't the Old Testament say that when the real Messiah shows up, the lame are going to walk, the blind are going to see, and the poor are going to get liberated? Well, guess what's happening up here in Galilee? So he makes an incarnational argument. When you're at a severe doubt crisis, of course you want the logic, of course you want the argument, but you want the incarnation. You want God to show up. You want to have the Apostle Paul experience. You want to be knocked off your horse onto the path, onto Damascus, and have something like fish scales fall from your eye. So I think the point theologically here that I think everyone will get stronger in their faith the more they study, think about, read about the historical nature of the incarnation of Christ.
So good. I was just talking with one of our staff members about the minimal facts approach to the resurrection and just this crazy idea that you could actually look back in history and ask this question, who is God? So I think what a privilege. I mean, obviously John the Baptist was living during it, and so Jesus he just had to say, this is what I'm doing. But we just get the privilege of looking back and seeing this is who God is. What I would add to that amazing point about the incarnation is I'd say, first of all, that theology always has an effect on the world. And
That's
so
good.
if your theology is not in any way impacting your social circle, if it's not impacting the world in the realm of justice, if it's not, I get so frustrated when there's controversy over the whole idea of the social gospel. The gospel is always meant to have social implications. I wouldn't say that it's the crux, like the heart and the soul. But here in this passage, Jesus is saying, he's not saying, here's these 3 things you should believe about me, just believe them in a vacuum. He's saying, look at who I am and the effect it's having on the world around me. So I'd say all theology needs to not just be orthodoxy, which is right belief. It also has to be orthopraxy, right practice. We have to have that right belief. Right belief always leads to right practice, and right practice always leads to right belief. And there really shouldn't be this controversy within Christianity about which one we need to focus on more. It's both. And even Jesus here is saying, like, hey, I am the truth, and this is what the truth looks like in the world.
Right.
The blind are healed, and the lame walk, and the poor and the oppressed, they're set free. So that's something I would add.
Yep.
And go ahead.
I would say ever since the Reformation, we've been working our hardest to tear those things apart.
Right.
In the dramatic and obvious face that both Romans and the book of James still exist, and make the argument so clear that if your good theology isn't leading to good works, it's not good theology, and the proof that you are saved is not your works, but it's your faith.
That's right.
That leads to good works. It's not that hard, but we've been trying to tear it apart. The people that are worried about orthodoxy don't like the people handing out groceries. The people like handing out groceries want to go, these pesky morals that you want me to stick to.
My gosh.
And we have this fight. And the truth is, it's both. And in the right order.
Right.
But it's both.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to first believe the truth, but then we have to live the truth. And like James says, if you're not living the truth, that shows you don't really believe the truth.
Yes.
And so I found it interesting as I was reading this passage today that Jesus specifically points to tangible world outcomes. And I get concerned about any form of Christianity that just wants to sit in a chair and argue about words. That's not what we're called to. We're called to believe the right things, orthodoxy, but we have to go out and we have to live those things, and it should affect the world around us.
Here's my favorite example of that. It's the healing of the leper. So, Sermon on the Mount. Greatest sermon ever preached. Everyone agrees on this.
Right.
Just read that section in Matthew where Jesus takes a stand on everything. And it's brilliant and powerful, and he doesn't teach like anyone else. He teaches with authority. You still get that feeling when you read those red letters to this day. Comes off of the mountain without a word. A leper approaches him. The crowd separates for the leper. Without a word of explanation, he does what custom and law would not allow him to do, which is touch his leprous skin.
That's right.
And what you see in that moment, and then many moments after that, is articulation followed by demonstration. Or sometimes it's demonstration, then he articulates. Some of us like to articulate, some of us like to demonstrate. The Jesus model is you do not divorce the two.
That's right.
He taught in the laboratory. There was teaching, but there was going to be a lab experiment, and someone's going to lose their eyebrows. And some of us want to be too in the lecture, and some of us, the whole misnomer of, preach the gospel and use words if necessary. They're always necessary.
That's right.
And what's his face didn't say that anyway. St. Francis never said that. You got to demonstrate and articulate and demonstrate and articulate. So incarnation, I see here, you see a real demonstration of working out of the true gospel by marrying the theology impacting the actions.
Yeah, it's just actually another branch of the incarnation. God didn't just tell us the right things. He came and he was the right thing among us, and he did the right things, and he impacted the world. And so for us to believe the right things, but then to not go out and practice the right things, it's we got to follow in Jesus' footsteps. He left heaven, and he didn't just have all of the right thoughts about us. He came and he acted on those thoughts.
Yeah.
And so I would add to that, just all of that. I think I can say it really simply. God loves messy people. Like there's a third thing in here, a third theological point. God is not offended by our mess. God is not just hoping we'd be a little stronger in our faith. God ends this whole passage by just really singing the praises of John the Baptist at his worst moment. He's not getting baptized by John and then being like, John, you are awesome. He's looking at John in his worst, darkest moment, and he's saying, that's the guy. Like, no one greater born among man, which I love that because obviously anyone born in the kingdom is born of God, right? And so it's like, yeah, everyone who comes into the kingdom is born of God is actually better than John the Baptist. But as far as like regards to to humanity, John the Baptist, like he makes me so proud. He's what I would point to as the example of what following me, pre me dying on the cross really should look like. And God loves messy people.
God loves messy people. Okay, now I want to change my answer, because right at the end of this, Jesus does make a theological point that really is the point he's trying to make. It might be even bigger than the incarnation. It might be bigger than demonstrating the real gospel, which is, you've said in two different ways now, that's what it means to love messy people, is the gospel. He sneaks in this little rebuke of people that try to get saved by works or relatives or heritage or special knowledge. And he's like, he's the best one that hasn't been born again yet.
Yeah. Which is not so great.
If you actually understand what I'm teaching, you're going to supersede that in your justification in God. So he gets a little sneaky preview lesson on what it means to be born again, what it means to surrender in faith, what it means to be saved by grace at the end there. And so, of course, Jesus in the end he's teaching us salvation here, and it's soteriological, probably in its biggest thing. And if you don't understand that, then go watch the Bible study. Okay.
Hey, Curt, I'm gonna cut you off.
Taylor,
That's
sorry,
really good. I'm
right.
going to stop you guys right there, but
Okay.
we're rolling on to our third question now. What should I do?
What should I do? Let's apply this. Okay. So we're going to master this thing, because doubt is unavoidable. If John the Baptist doubt, we're all going to doubt. Number two, Jesus is both incarnational here and really demonstrating living out the gospel, the authentic gospel here, pointing to the fact that we're saved by faith at the end of it. What do I do with all this now? It's good thoughts, but what do I do with it?
I'd say start by processing how you believe God has disappointed you. And that, like, to even say those words out loud sounds so theologically wrong. And I believe God does not disappoint, but I don't believe that I always believe that God doesn't disappoint. And I believe in this passage, John believed that Jesus had kind of let him down, either by not being who he thought he would be or allowing him to get into some really bad circumstances. I was talking with a member of my small group recently, and she said, like, I just feel like I've been, like, stuck on disappointment, and God's told me, like, move on. Like, I don't want to be disappointed anymore. I don't want to be numb. Like, just all these things. And I said, you know what I'm going to do for you every single day? I'm going to text you every single day, and I'm going to ask you the question, what are you disappointed by? And she's like such a great Christian. So of course what she did is she just started texting me what she was disappointed by. She had 3 little jars: disappointments in herself, disappointment in other, and disappointment in God. And she just started filling those jars up as this spiritual discipline of telling God what was really grieving her heart. And I think that is what John is doing here. He is saying, I don't understand. My heart is really grieved. I'm kind of disappointed by what I thought you were going to do in the world and what I'm seeing, or the lack of me just really knowing about all of these miracles you're performing. It's just not adding up for me. So I'd say first step would be begin to process your disappointments, especially your disappointments with God.
It's so good. I want you that are listening to this that think that faith is presenting a perfect picture to God, even though you know in your heart that he already knows your heart. Look at the psalmists. The psalmists are out there going, God, you promised this. It's not happening yet. Will I praise you? They're free to complain and process their disappointments. Somehow, in our perfection-addicted Christianity, we're more worried about our presentation to God than we are of just being honest. I am disappointed with this. You know what usually busts that down, Dena, is profound grief. Okay, I was able to do it when I didn't get promoted. I was able to do it when my family member was grumpy with me. But when my spouse passed, when there was that car accident, when there was that cancer report, then I just got honest with God and said, what in the crud? What in the crud is going on?
But don't you think some people get honest with God? But that's, for others, that's the exact point at which they stop talking to God, because they don't know how, that it's okay to say to God, I'm disappointed that you let that happen. That was not what I signed up for.
The person I like the most is the person that started being that honest with God before the tragedy hit.
Right.
I'm thinking of my friend Alicia Sholey. She preaches like this. It's okay to go, So what doesn't, here's a great question to ask of any passage. What doesn't happen that you thought might happen? So John's in the cell. He has the doubt. He writes the note. Are you the one? Gets his disciples. They will walk all the way up to Galilee. Jesus is healing and preaching away. Hey, Jesus, can we have your attention? Remember John the Baptist, your old friend. Here's your relative, cousins, all that. We got a note from him. Oh, Jesus doesn't go back and tell him that when he baptized me, a voice came from heaven and said, this is my son. Does he remember this? This is my son. Do you remember when we were in the womb and both you and I started doing jumping jacks when we first met in the, this has been this few short years. None of that happens. And it says deliberately in the passage, Jesus turned to the crowd. He doesn't whisper in these guys' ears, man, by the way, your guy, there's no better guy than him. Go back and tell him I said that.
Yeah.
He wants him to go back and say, Jesus is saying this to everyone about you. What I get from that is, what is clear from that, not just what I get, Jesus embraces the doubt.
That's right.
Jesus rewards the doubt. This is the Jesus who said, ask and you'll be answered, seek and you'll find, knock and the door will be opened to you. This is the Jesus in Revelation that says, I stand at the door and knock. If you'll open the door, we can have a chat about this. This is the Jesus who said, Zacchaeus, I know how corrupt you are. I know the dollars you pocketed. By the way, hey, I also know what a good cook you are.
Right.
Let's go to your kitchen. This is the Jesus that said, yeah, I know you're not on their first husband. I know, actually. This is actually, well, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I still want to drink from your cup, woman at the well. And we need to change our concept of what God's response to our doubt is. And if we do that, that's where the breakthrough happens. That's where the deconstruction, that's the good kind of deconstruction happens I was talking about last week, and we actually come to a stronger place of doubt. So here's my bottom line application, and I'll let you have the last word. Ask more questions. Ask more questions of God. Ask more questions of yourself. Send a text of questions to someone. Ask more questions. Questions in a sincere faith are a powerful catalyst. They can be asked in a cynical way, sure. They can be asked in a way that's setting up you excusing things, but almost always questions become a powerful tool towards building the right faith. And don't be afraid of the questions from your friends and family and loved ones, especially your children, mom and dad. Encourage the questions and go on the journey of answering those questions with God.
That's so good. I think my last word would be going to that phrase that Jesus kind of closes his last thought to John the Baptist. He says, blessed is the man who does not, different translations, but stumble on account of me. Blessed is the man that, pretty much encounters me and that doesn't trip him up. Blessed is the man who encounters me and that doesn't become a real problem for him. Blessed is the man who encounters the real me and that real me is actually what he wanted and what he was looking for. And so I'd say just be careful that you're not attempting to follow a Jesus that is not the Jesus that he is. And it's
really good, Dana.
It's really clear that this was a moment where Jesus was saying, yeah, John, this is who I am. I am the person that heals the blind and that sets the oppressed free. I'm also the man that allows you to go to prison, and ultimately what's coming is not a good story either. Blessed is the man who doesn't fall away on account of me. And so I just say, to love Jesus, to follow Jesus, is to love the Jesus that actually is. And so as you get to know who that Jesus is, what he will and will not allow, make sure you're following him and you're loving the actual Jesus. So, and you can only really know Jesus by asking him those questions. It's through conversation that people get to know each other. And so if you're not asking Jesus those hard questions, you're not actually getting to know the real him, because you have to let him answer those questions. You have to let him in, and he will keep letting you in. So
what a powerful thought, and a perfect thought for the flip side. That's the sort of thought that helps us not just, digest a sermon on the weekend, but really chew on it in a way that builds real, authentic faith. And I just want to tell you, there's someone out there they really need to actually recalibrate to the real Jesus. And they really need to ask some questions and not be afraid of questions. Will you do me a favor? Would you share this episode? Get them tuned in the flip side. How much better would it be if all of us stopped being sermons on Sunday people and started being living out the truth every single day? The sermon on Sunday becomes a launch pad, not a period, and we actually are grappling with these issues in a healthy way all week long. That's what the flip side does. That's why we're asking these questions. Get someone and share this with them right now. Next week, we're going to continue this idea of keep the faith, and we're going to talk about it in terms of not our family, but a little bit wider, our community. So you definitely want to jump in for that passage. We'll see you the next time on the flip side.